You're listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast with Ken Lucci of Driving Transactions and James Blaine of PAX Training. Learn how you can build a thriving transportation business with real profits, repeat clients, and enterprise value. And now for your hosts, Ken and James.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. I am Sans, my partner, James Blaine from PAX Training. No doubt he's out doing a chauffeur training program with one of the bigger operators in the region. So I'm flying solo, but I have with me one of my best friends in the industry I've shared a stage with. And every time we go on a stage at an executive retreat or at an NLA conference, we just rock the house with information, don't we?
We do.
I am so pleased.
It's electric.
It is electric. So I am, if you're into M&A, regulatory, and legal, absolutely is, and finance. So I am so pleased to have Matthew W. Daus with me today, Esquire, the founder and chair of the transportation practice at Windows Marks. Long storied history. The bottom line is this man is the best and most renowned transportation attorney in the United States, knows the regulatory side, knows the operator side. His practice does the legal side of M&A. So we work together on a lot of deals. So I have absolutely been chomping at the bit to get him on the podcast. We're going to have him back regularly to talk about a few things. Today, we're going to talk about autonomous and we're going to talk about the insurance crisis. But Matt, give us a little bit of your background. You've got a long history beyond Windows Marks. You've been, New York politics. Give us a rundown of your bio.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. Sorry that we're missing James today, but we'll do another one when he's back.
Yep.
But those are really kind words, Ken, and coming from you, that's, really flattering because I know you are the leading financial consultant and M&A guy in this industry. And we've done such great work together. It's just, it's really a privilege to continue to not just share the stage with you, but we work on deals together, which is, been very beneficial for those involved in those deals and also for the industry at large. So, thanks for taking the time and having me today.
We are the dream team when it comes to doing deals in this industry. I have to say it. Our financial analysis, the negotiation part, your team on the legal side. I don't think you can get better. I don't think you can get better representation from a Wall Street M&A company or what do they call that? A white shoe law firm. You guys got it dialed in.
Yeah, it's an interesting phrase, a white shoe law firm. I mean, we've been around for a while, and actually, I'll go back to the beginning. I mean, I didn't even know I wanted to be a lawyer. I had no interest in transportation. I'm a musician. I wanted to be a musician. My parents talked me out of it, told me if you're ever homeless, you're not going to be able to come in to sleep with us if you go that route. So they kind of pressured me into doing something that I could earn money at. And they were right in retrospect. I know a lot of people who pursued their dreams. Most of them, they didn't make it. So I'm in a position now where I play for fun, as you know.
Because you have a day job that pays you real money. So...
in my young mind, I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. And that was my dream because at the time when I decided to go to law school, because frankly, I'm afraid of needles and I want to be a doctor.
And blood.
I kind of figured out this may be the way to get into the music industry. And, when I got out of law school, I'm like, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Entertainment lawyers are basically agents. And I came out of law school at a time when it was a very difficult time to get a job. It was Bush Senior's recession.
Sure.
So I ended up taking, the first job I could get, which was doing medical malpractice law, and I hated it. I just didn't, I felt like every time that there was handling a case, I had a disease myself. It was kind of a depressing thing. And I just took a stab and just got involved in politics through, some mutual friends. I hated politics, wanted nothing to do with it when I was in college and law school, even though I was a poli-sci major. And I got involved with a couple of campaigns, and then I ended up working for the city of New York more than I ever thought I would. I started out as a human rights prosecutor, got promoted. If you're in government and you have political connections and you work hard, you're the sky's the limit if you know how to stay out of trouble, right?
Yep.
So when I got into government, I went from human regs to being general counsel of community development. And then I got involved with getting the mafia out of the trade waste industry. And then I ended up working for my own boss, who became my old boss at one of those agencies, who became the taxi commissioner. So I really just followed her because I liked working for her.
Sure.
And I came in as special counsel, cleaned up a huge mess with the administrative law judges. The court at the TLC was an abysmal mess. I mean, my first
Matt,
day,
what years?
we're talking about 1996.
Yeah.
My first day at work, there was a flood with summonses and violations floating all over the floor. I mean, I kid you not. And then, the big issue was taxi drivers would fight with the judges, and because the judges were giving the decisions in front of them, finding them guilty, so they would throw the tables over. We had a crowd control problem. There was hundreds of people in the waiting room, and the prior administration's response to that, if there's too many people in the waiting room, let's not schedule things right. Let's just dismiss the summonses.
Wow.
So, I mean, I walked in one day, and there was water coming down from the elevator. I had to walk through it. My suit got all wet. And then 2 days later, someone pulled the fire alarm because there was too many people at TLC in the room, and there was a riot. And they took the inspectors, and the cab drivers were carrying them like crowd surfing, like carrying them like by their legs. I mean, there was violence.
Unbelievable.
Horrible. So I took that job seriously. We cleaned the tribunal up, and then I was promoted to general counsel. And then when my boss retired, I was appointed commissioner and reappointed. And it was a tough process, and you had to go through the city council. It's not just, the mayor appointing you. You have to actually be approved by the legislative body.
Sure.
I went through that twice. And a lot of people will notice, but the second time I went through for reappointment, they never actually voted on me. I got it by default. I was going to get the votes anyway, but I had left because things looked really good when they were voting on me. And then there was a council member who was elected, and the guy who lost the election came in and shot up the city council and killed people. So that happened the day I was reappointed. Unfortunately, some people were injured. I believe some folks were killed, and they had massive security at City Hall. A lot of people don't know this story. And I had my whole TLC staff up there, and I said, you know what? Things are looking good. Let's go back to our office and watch the returns on TV.
Sure.
We're all sitting in my office popping some champagne, and then some guy comes in, starts shooting the place up. So that wasn't the end of my career. That was kind of the beginning. I was there for about 9 years as commissioner, 14 years at TLC. And then I decided to leave about almost 15 years ago. And I've had pretty much 3 consistent hats, as you know, since then. I was asked to, when I was elevated as president of the ITR, which is the Taxi Commissioners Organization.
So that's the regulatory association of all of the regulators in the country.
Correct. And beyond. It's national.
Huge.
So taxi commissioners, limousine commissioners, PUC entities. I've been doing that since 2009. I don't get paid for it, but we assess best practices. And it's important for my clients in the industry because we don't really fight with the regulators at my law firm. Like, we know the regulators.
You can't. It's a losing battle to oppose the regulators in that way. Diplomacy is a key to what you do in that role.
Absolutely. I mean, every once in a while we'll have a lawsuit here and there, but we try to stay away from it. There's a problem for a limousine operator. We try to solve it. We have conversations, and they take us seriously because someone was telling me, how are you going to be a lawyer and still hang out with the regulators? I was like, well, why not? I said, why not? And this is an issue in the insurance industry, right? You have to represent the plaintiffs or the defendants. It's always black and white.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that way. So for 15 years, we've kept our relationships with the regulators really good. And also my academic hat, transportation technology chair at the City University of New York. Academia is really important too. Those academic connections help the industry. It helps me identify trends before they happen because
100%.
The regulators work with the academics and the law practice. Transportation law did not exist when we created this practice. People are like, what is that? Now everybody knows what it is because of all the disruption with Uber. One of the greatest compliments is when Senator Al D'Amato opened up his lobbying practice. 5 months after he saw I was doing good work and making money, they started calling it the transportation lobbying practice. And now
Sure.
you got people staying their transportation lawyers all over the country. And when I went out there, it was like, what is that? So my firm was the perfect place to go because, as you know, we are very flexible with rates because it's a mid-sized firm.
Yep.
We have 150 lawyers. We've been around since the 1800s. One of the partners that was here for many, many years before, who encouraged me to join, was Tony Kosher, who was the chair of the Port Authority for 12 years. And now he's Amtrak chairman. Really, really good group of people. And I built the team from scratch. At the beginning, it was just me. I even was in court, litigating cases. And then we started branching out. We started with taxis and limo clients. And then we branched out and we represent everything and anybody. And we try to stay a couple of steps ahead of the curve, as you do with your business, Kim. Like we try to identify the trends and learn about things before they become a thing. We've done that with flying taxis or automated vehicles, with multimodal mobility like microtransit, stuff like that. So the good news is that we not only do we know what we're doing, it's a full service law firm. So we do everything: M&A, contracts, terms and services, litigation. We do pretty much everything, but you're not going to waste your money by getting a really good attorney who knows nothing about transportation. They're learning on your time, right? And they don't have connections that we have, and they also don't understand the trends the way they do. So it worked out well. It's a niche practice, and we even work with other law firms who do expert witness work. We do a little bit of everything. So we're multimodal, and we got expertise in buses, automated enforcement.
Sure.
You name it, we're involved in it. Trucking, deliveries, logistics, where it's all on the table.
But you hit upon something that is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I had a conversation with, someone who's extraordinarily wealthy and Harvard educated. And his question to me was, why wouldn't I hire a boutique investment bank? I said, because they don't have the data we have in the industry. They don't know the industry. They don't know the industry trends. And you're going to be paying them $1,000 an hour to learn, whereas you're going to be paying us a lot less. And I said, not to mention the fact that, that is the key, is the past experience, what's going on in the industry, but more importantly, is the future trends of the business. And that's what your practice brings to the table. I mean, I get calls all the time from people who say, well, I'm a transportation M&A attorney. And I'll say, all right, give me your last 2 or 3 transactions. And they can't, and I will say, I mean, I appreciate you saying that about our M&A. We come up from the bootstrap from doing small transactions, but the depth of knowledge and experience that you have on the regulatory side, so goes New York, so goes the rest of the country eventually. So I wanted to talk about 2 things today. Mm-hmm. One is look, we are in a crisis on the fleet insurance side of the industry that I don't believe is going to go away. My question to you is, so first we're going to talk about that fleet insurance briefly, but then I want to talk about autonomous vehicles. I was out at the Arizona Livery Association 2 weeks ago, and I took my first Waymo ride. I also sat at the airport, looked at their depot, watched what was going on, and then I took a bunch of Uber rides. So I really want to deep dive on that. So if we can spend 5-7 minutes on where you think the insurance crisis is going to go, and then let's talk future autonomous. Let's hit everything we can on what's going on with our friend Elon, and perhaps politically, what is he trying to accomplish in this realm? Some stuff hit the wire today on that. So everybody in the industry on the insurance side. I had a great conversation with Tim Delaney from Lancer the other day. And frankly, I got to tell you, they're not the enemy. They're not the cause. They are not the ones that are responsible for people's insurance increases. They are a part of an ecosystem that they have very little control over. I'm kind of tired of people saying my agent's no good or my carrier's greedy. The numbers just don't support that. They lose money on the commercial side of the industry constantly. And, they've been for years talking to operators about taking risk mitigation seriously. So my question is, where does this crisis, Where are we going with this crisis and what ultimately happens? 25 and beyond.
Something needs to change because the same old is not working. I think there's a lot of things that the insurance industry has been grappling with. I think distracted driving is on the rise. People are back with their cars post-pandemic. They lost a lot of money during the pandemic, as we all did.
As we all did.
Bailed out like the airlines were. So look, you find a good insurance underwriter and you file rates, they could claim, oh, it's because of losses and claims. I still think that, part of it also is driven by not just the increases in claims and the size of the claims,
Yes.
in an increasingly litigious society. I think the story that's behind the scenes that we'll never know about is, like every other industry, they're trying to play catch up and make up for losses during the pandemic. Some people, like in New York in particular, like the two things that I think put American Transit over the edge, because since the moment I joined TLC in the 90s, there was rumors about them being insolvent or about to go under for 30 years now.
For the audience, American Transit is the biggest carrier in the livery space in New York.
And it's not just livery, it's taxis, it's Ubers, it's everything. They write for everybody, and there's competition in the marketplace, but there probably needs to be more, and their rates have been notoriously low. They've been able to compete and drive a lot of people out of the market. But during the pandemic, the one thing that really fueled their growth and allowed them to stay solvent for many years is when Uber came into the market and grew exponentially. When the TLC put a cap on the number of vehicles,
Sure,
that really hurt. And then the pandemic was a double whammy because American Transit and other insurers like Lancashire did the right thing. They participated in this program that the TLC put together to put medallions and FHVs in storage so that you didn't have to pay your insurance because you weren't working during the pandemic.
right.
Well, all those things kind of, I think, put American Transit finally over the edge, in addition to claims piling up. And now we're in a pickle, but it is a unique problem for New York City because, as you know, we have very solid national players like Lancer and other insurance carriers that are out there, and really good insurance brokers like Research Underwriters and others. They're
phenomenal.
That are in this space,
Yep.
that understand it. And if you shop around, you'd be surprised what you can get. And every state has different issues. Like Florida, for instance, and then I have to commend Rick Versace and FLA.
Rich
Florida
Versace from A1A runs a great operation down on the East Coast.
And they in Texas are attracting new insurers because they have tort reform. They have a contributory negligence bar. For those who don't know what that is, when you go to law school, every state has different comparative negligence or contributory negligence laws. What does that mean? It means if you're the person who's suing and you're the plaintiff because you've been injured in a crash, were you negligent also? And what happens if you are? Most juries will say, okay, someone was injured, it's $100,000 that in damages. How much of that is the plaintiff's fault and how much of that is the defendant's fault? And they'll actually put a percentage on it. So
Sure.
technically, if it's 80% the fault of the defendant, they're going to get $80,000 of the $100,000. That's exactly how it works. There are minority states, and this is something that Florida and Texas are working on, a lot of tort reform, called the contributory negligence bar. What does that mean? After everybody decides who's responsible for what, if the plaintiff is more than 51% at fault, then they can't recover anything. So like the tort reform is actually driving where the insurers are going at this point. So they're fleeing the states that have, these huge verdicts, and the trial lawyers that represent the plaintiff's bar, have a lot of power to give a lot of contributions in a lot of states, including New York and California and elsewhere. And that's the bigger battle, Ken. But like, I just don't see the blue states pushing back on that. In fact, they're looking to go in the other direction. The other day,
It's crazy.
Governor has a bill about wrongful death cases and, allowing for pain and suffering where they don't currently have it now. So in states like California and New York, in years from now, I don't see massive tort reform happening. In the red states that are looking to attract people and businesses, you're going to see it.
Red or purple. Red or purple.
So that's the big picture.
Yeah.
Short term, 5 years to now, it depends on the industry and what they want to do. People shop around. Insurers, when they see that they're threatened, with competition or the industry complaining will try for a couple of years to just keep their rates stable. But in addition to shopping around it, things that operators can do to mitigate their losses and to look into different solutions. And there's things regulators can do. What can a company do? They can get telematics. They can put the cameras in.
And manage by it and look at them and change the behavior of the driver.
Exactly. And it's a little tricky with, when you have independent contracted drivers because there are legitimate issues there, but there's a way to get it done. And I think having a third-party entity do it and have drivers voluntarily sign up for it and agree to it, there's ways that this can be done, and it reduces claims 50 to 60%. The first people that I've seen that have done this, in the 90s, I saw people doing this. Tim Rose and Mike Rose, when they were at Flight Time, and Empire CLS and Sealinger, they all had this stuff way before anybody else did. And companies like Valera Global, they used to be known as Computer Car, Eckstein, and
Dave Eckstein.
Dave Eckstein did this at great risk to his business at the time because he had independent contractors.
Yeah.
But no one ever sued him, to my knowledge, about the labor issue. But he has been able to, his business, he told me, actually survived and would have gone under if he did not have the telematics cameras in, because there were a couple of big lawsuits where they caught on tape what exactly happened and they were able to, to beat the case. So
let's stop there for 1 second, because you mentioned a statistic that when you have telematics in the vehicles, and now they are very sophisticated, speed of the vehicle, distracted driver, reckless driving, speeding, etc., you can manage by them. The claims go down 50 to 60%. You're the third person to tell me that. So when somebody complains to me that a telematics cost X, okay, my answer is, if you manage your business by it, this is another form of insurance for you. But now I want you to talk about the downside or the negative side of having it, but not managing by it, because it can come back and bite you in the ass on a lawsuit if you're not doing something with the data.
That's exactly right. And this is a double-edged sword, because for years, back in the 90s, I tried to get this program off the ground with the insurers in New York, and it was voluntary with incentives and discounts, but a lot of the fleet drivers basically told the taxi owners at the time, if you put this in, I'm working for your competitor. I don't want to be watched. No employee wants to be watched, right? We have work from home now. We don't know what people are really doing during the day, but this is like something where it could really bite you hard if there's stuff on the videos and you don't take action.
Exactly.
Like that brought additional lawsuit. So there needs to be a program in place, which is very time intensive. Like, I remember when I first visited, when I was commissioner, Computer Car, when David showed me what he did, they actually had hired people to sit there and watch videos all day. You don't have to do that anymore because the software has AI and they can automatically just isolate the things that have happened.
It pops up the problems for you.
And it's great, but you have to take action. Where it gets tricky is when there are independent contractor drivers involved, depending on the state. They might say that you're exerting control over them and bring a classification lawsuit saying that you're their employer. So that's.
But your point about the third party doing it is extraordinary. You could basically say, look, this is what you get paid, but we can pay you a little bit more if you're on this telematics program.
Correct. And that's exactly how Uber did it. Uber is always very sensitive to getting these lawsuits. So in New York, they actually partnered with Nexar, and after Ira Goldstein from the Black Car Fund did a pilot program with Nexar, where they bought some cameras. Yep. And believe it or not, it really had nothing to do with insurance, because all of the insurers in New York had approval for discounts. They stopped giving them a long time ago. Hereford, Lancer, American Transit. That's not why the drivers put them in. But now there's 30,000 cameras in New York City in black cars and limos, because a lot of those cars also work for Uber and Lyft.
Yep.
And they put it in because of the passenger ratings.
Yep.
Like, they would have fights with passengers. The passengers would put in a negative rating and the driver would be turned off the platform. So they bought these cameras, which are forward facing and inward facing, so they can press a button when they start having an argument with the passenger. And that's why they did it. But the result is that, you could actually see the entire city. The data that they collect is amazing. And I believe that it's made the industry safer. There are studies on this, Ken. There are studies in the insurance industry, tons of them, that show that as soon as you put a camera in, your claims will go down 50 to 60%. And you can talk to anyone in the industry that's done this. That's what the case is. And now it's easier because all the stuff that David Eckstein used to do doesn't need to be done anymore. It can be automated, and then but you have to take action, like I said. And Uber, what they did is they provided a program where the leasing and rental companies, which I think is the future, who are third parties that in New York City, there's like 5 or 6 companies that they own the permits, they own the vehicles, and the drivers just come to them and rent the car for a day or a week.
Sure.
And they're separate entities. So by them putting the cameras in, or by the drivers putting them in on their own, Uber doesn't have to worry about it. And that's how they were able to do it. Now, there's pathways to do this. If I was a limo operator right now, I'd put them in, I'd figure out a way to do it with a separate entity, and then talk to lawyers about how to structure it to avoid and mitigate risk. I'm on a mission now where I've been commissioned by the NLA to work with my university on a report that'll be coming out on reforming and addressing the limo crisis. As you know, Ken, we gave a big presentation, you and I, earlier this year. That report is going to have specific recommendations, and I need a really quick preview. Regulators need to mandate it. If the regulators mandate the cameras, the labor issues go away. Whenever a mandate comes from a regulator,
completely
it can't be used against you in court. That solves the problem, and you don't have to, because operators, unfortunately, are very short-sighted. Like, oh, I want a discount. I want money now. Why should I invest in this? You know how many times I speak to people and they're like, why should I invest in a camera system? It's too much money. I'm trying to make ends meet. Well, you know what? When your claims and your insurance in 5 years go down significantly, everything will pay for itself by tenfold. And so I'm a big believer in telematics. One thing I think that should be explored more is people either sharing their vehicles or creating and working with independent entities like rental companies that will
connected and shared capacity, because you cannot afford to build the cathedral of 300, 400, 500 cars for the Sunday service. You have to have connected and shared capacity. 100% agree with you, especially the sedan SUV side.
This can be done. It's an interesting business model. I mean, look, let's follow what Uber did. Look, Uber is, they've had their issues. They've been a long time before they got profitable, but they have a model that they use Enterprise Hertz and Avis vehicles for their drivers, which is a third-party entity. And in New York City, like I said, there's like 5 or 6 companies that all they do is rent to Uber and Lyft drivers, and those same drivers service the limo industry. So the model itself is a good one because it solves the insurance crisis to a certain extent, because those companies have the ability to get captive insurance models and get fleet insurance and self-insurance, things that the small operator can't do. A small operator with 3 vehicles can't do that. So why wouldn't all the, and this is something that, Rick in Florida is looking at, with the captives. Captives are complicated. It's something that you need capital. And I think
captive insurance is very complicated financially, number one, operationally, and you hit the nail on the head with that. Total emphasis.
If someone would develop a business model similar to the companies in New York that are working for Uber, it would be very successful. What do I mean by that? A company that buys vehicles and rents them out to the limo drivers, and also when you need to get a bus every once in a while, but you don't need it all the time. That's a great place to start. Like there are 10 small companies in California and they can't afford, their own bus. Right. So why not put your money together or have a separate entity that will rent it out to them and take care of the insurance
and the maintenance and the repair? It's basically a communal leasing company. There's no question about it.
But having a safety program with your drivers, putting the telematics in, these are things that can be done right away. Captives are very complicated. Self-insurance is complicated. It involves investments, and not every operator is able to do that. So I would say focus on the rental industry, telematics, have a safety program in place, and also, look at alternative business models. And this is something that can be done in the short term. I think tort reform is a long thing. It's going to take 5 to 7 years to get a bill done and changes to be made in that regard. However, like in New York in particular, they have this split insurance thing. The DLC is unfortunately proposing to get rid of it, which I think is a mistake, where you have 100, 300 in limits. You can get the first 25, 50 that's state mandated for every vehicle through a general carrier like Geico or State Farm. And then you could buy from another carrier the difference between the 25, 50 and the 100, 300. You could stack policies. It's cheaper. It can be done. Uber's kind of done it in a roundabout way with the TNC insurance, where you basically get, the state minimum, and then they pay for everything above that. That's a model that I think can and should be explored in various states. And those are things that could be done midterm solutions. But short term, put some cameras in the cars. Figure out a way to do it. That will reduce, like in a year or two, it'll show your losses and your claims reduction, and your drivers will be more responsible, and it'll be much better for you. So we're going to be looking at all these issues in our report, Ken. We're hoping to have the report out, in January or February. Yep. Specific concrete recommendations on what limo operators can do. We're working with the NLA. We're going to be surveying the NLA members as part of this project, and we're excited about it. And we do believe things can and will change over time, but we have to treat it like the crisis that it is.
No question about
it. It's a crisis until I renew, and then I have to worry about it for the rest of the year.
Well,
Bottom line is,
and what they do, unfortunately, what operators do is they are a matter of fact and reactive about their insurance renewal time. Oh, well, my agent will take care of me. Okay, well, the other 12 months of the year, you need to build a case. And I talked to Steve Freeberg about this from Research Underwriters. We spent a lot of time on the phone, and the same with Tim Delaney from Lancer. You have to mitigate risk every single day and create a culture of safety that becomes muscle memory, okay? And you look at telematics, you look at your driver safety scores, and if they're sub 90%, you need to address them. If you find you have a driver that is aggressive driving, braking, speeding, etc., you really have to have a paper trail where you try to say you change that behavior, or you have to get rid of them. And for those of the operators that think, oh, I just stole a chauffeur from my biggest competitor, well, you might have just taken his worst headache off his plate. I think you need to be more collegiate about getting the risky chauffeurs and CDLs out of the industry, okay? And I'm really only passionate about it because it has permeated my business, okay? People are coming to me, they want to sell their businesses, or they need to borrow and create a line of credit to borrow money to pay their insurance bill. So, one last thing. Rick Versace in Florida has proven that small business and operators, not a small operator, he's about a $10 million operator, that independent businesses can make a difference. I think that guy is spending a third to 40% of his time on the insurance crisis for Florida. So I would encourage the state associations to let's drop the competitive aspects and be more collegiate on this and cooperative on this crisis. So, and listen, you're at the forefront of it. If the NLA didn't have you to do the education and the research on this and put together the position paper, I think we'd be in trouble as an industry. And that's the stuff that nobody sees. When they hire you, they say, wow, you charge more than my real estate lawyer. No shit, because I know the transportation space. You're well worth it because of what you do for the industry. So now let's turn the topic to something that, again, coming across our desk every single day is autonomous taxis. Where do you think first of all, where do you think that's going? Right now, they've been approved in LA. They're approved in San Francisco. They are all over Phoenix, Arizona. They're going to be going to Austin, Texas. They're going to be opening in Miami next year. Waymo is big in this. And Waymo is part of Google. ZooX is part of Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously we have Elon Musk looming around. And the rumor is that his robocabs are going to go right to Uber. So give me your thought process on the timeline on regulatory. Where are we going to see this grow to 10 cities a year?
To back up for a minute, I think this is a thing. I mean, this is real. Like, people are still thinking, oh, this is just fantasy. It is real. Do I think it is going to take over the limo industry or the taxi industry and replace everything overnight? Absolutely. I don't think even in the long term it will. It will be one of many different ways that you get around. It'll increase over time and in scope and scale and in certain cities before others, because there are some regulatory environments that are more harsh than others. And the state laws that are dealing with this issue and this labor issues. So it depends on the regulator that you're dealing with. Like, the transportation regulators are obviously concerned about safety, but there are other issues that are socioeconomic issues that they're very much top of mind for them. That's wheelchair accessibility. It's equity. It's still an issue in a lot of blue states and cities. There's the issue of labor displacement, which is political. The Teamsters is trying to fight every single one of these bills and trying to get a requirement that there be a driver in the car. Well, what's the whole point of having an autonomous car if you have a driver in it? But
Right.
I don't see this affecting the non-emergency medical transit or limousine industry anytime soon. People like me are paying for a limo because I want somebody in there, right? I'm not, but people, in certain communities or at Disney and retirement communities and places like Arizona. I don't know how was your experience, Ken?
It was a novelty. It was a little nerve-wracking, because I'm an anxious person anyway. And I think from a type A control perspective, I felt better. I would feel better to have a driver in the seat. It would seem slow to me. It definitely seemed slow to me, but it was enjoyable. They have the dental chair music playing, and it was Jetsons kind of a thing. In general, I think it was better than if you had a recalcitrant driver or you had a driver that you kind of cringed about how they were driving. It seemed safe to me. The funny thing is, I was behind, heading back to the airport in a chauffeured car. I was watching 4 of these vehicles, right? Matt, literally within seconds, the blinkers are going on within seconds. It was like a choreographed. So the precision was unbelievable to me. And when they pulled up, they all pulled up within inches of that line the same way. So I'm with you that I think it's going to affect the limousine aspect of the world and the NEMT aspects of the world later. But we have the Elon factor. And I have to, just for the audience, what came out today was the Trump administration wants to stop the mandate that autonomous vehicles have to report accidents on the federal level. Now, to me, that is the first of what Elon's agenda is. I got to be careful. I guess I don't. I believe that Elon's purpose of saddling up to our president is to move forward on the federal level, autonomous vehicles and his robo taxis. He has a habit. I've read all the biographies on this guy. He has a habit of goosing his stock by talking about the next thing. And he's been talking autonomous for a long time, and he stubbed his toe on the tech side. So his stock goes up. And then when he doesn't necessarily is not able to deliver the tech as fast, his stock regulates again. The other piece of the autonomous thing, Matt, the patents that are coming out on the autonomous technology, the value of those patents is incredible. So put a timeline on this. When do you see this going to 20 cities, 25 cities, 30 cities? And then when do you see it happening in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, the old line, eastern cities?
Well, it's already happening in New York. The testing and the mapping is done. And let's just step back and do big picture. And I'm glad you enjoyed the ride, because I was very skeptical myself until I took them myself in. We did our conference last year in Scottsdale.
Yep.
So all the regulators in the cars. I took them in San Francisco at the TRB Arts Convention a year or so ago. And, like, it's sophisticated. I mean, both Cruise and Waymo have the most dedicated, best technology. Cruise, unfortunately, is out of the running as of this week.
That came out this week that General Motors is going to focus their autonomous tech on their consumer vehicles, and they're dropping the taxi cab Cruise.
And apparently I heard, just some inside information, because I know people at Cruise. Unfortunately, the employees at Cruise, from what I was told, never learned about it internally, that they've read about it in the paper, which,
well, that's General
honestly,
Motors. That's General Motors.
That's the GM way of doing things. But, it creates less competition in some ways, because the only real robotaxi models that are left in the mix, when you look at the big picture, are Waymo Cruise. And these are sophisticated cars. When I got in them, I mean, they were going around in opposing traffic when someone was beeping and backing up into us. Like, they are sophisticated. They have eyes behind their head and at every level, like Octopi. I mean, basically, you could see things that a driver can't see. They could see things in the blind spots. So,
and that'll be the argument.
The safety question has been answered. It is safer than a human driver. There's no question about it. But some vehicle technology is different and better than others. And we won't, call names here, but, the business model is also different. There are basically three business models. There's the robotaxi model, the Uberization, which is the Waymo Cruise way. Now Cruise is out in the picture. Uber was smart to get out of doing it themselves and now being more like a platform. So their partnership with Waymo is where I think the future is going to be in the next 5 years, is where they start cropping up in more and more cities as using their own app, Waymo, but also as one of many ways to get around on the Uber app. And I think it's going to remain that way for a long time, but it is scaling, and you will see it in New York. You will see it elsewhere. The mayor of New York wants this. I mean, he said that on the night he was elected. There's more legislation and local rules that are very strict in New York City, so it's a lot of hurdles. But Waymo has the Uber type, on-demand model. Zoox and Beat and, May Mobility, which has an accessible vehicle.
Yeah, May Mobility's up in Michigan, privately held at this point.
It's a very different business model. It's more shared mobility, multiple passengers. You're going to see those at airports, retirement communities, college campuses, and it's going to be integrated into transit. Yeah. Waymo is really the only company left standing. With Tesla has a different business model. That's the third business model. And I think there's a lot of confusion about where Elon is going to go with this. And I think, to your point, we could talk about Elon for like an entire podcast.
We're going to try to get him on, by the way, Matt. You're going to be on that episode when we get him.
We'll just have to go down and hang outside the gate at Mar-a-Lago.
Didn't that get, we got to be careful about that.
Obviously, because, what you do for clients is kind of like what Daus is doing, right? Like, so I love the fact that him and Vivek are going in there looking to cut the federal government, because it is a mess. And it is.
Oh, it's a total mess.
Like, you do that for your clients. You're like the Daus for limo operators, because you go in there, you tell them how to trim their costs, and they're spending money on unnecessary things. That's really, really important. But putting his agendas aside, because he's got tons of agendas. I can't. I gotta tell you, there's a lot of skepticism about his recent announcements, because he left everybody on the fence, pushed back his announcement from August. It's just one of these things where they don't engage their team the way that Waymo does. Like, Waymo is out on the streets talking to the regulators and to the public officials, and when they're coming, they're collaborative. Tesla has probably the most data that you can imagine because of the self-driving mode. They've been on the road for years, and their business model to date has been different, or the speculation about the business model is that, and this is something that Elon's been talking about for years. They even had students doing a hackathon on in 2015, that people are going to buy them for themselves, and then they're going to lease them out as robo-taxis during the day, and it's going to come back. So you take it to work, it goes and it picks people up, and then it comes back to pick you up and take you home. That could be real, but he didn't, in his press announcement, talk more about that. Everybody was expecting it to be more, and he basically just unveiled two new vehicles. He has the Cybercab, which is the robotaxi model, and he's got the Robo van, right? So I just don't know. There's a lot of questions being raised about what he's planning to offer it for. He's saying that basically in 2026 it's gonna be something like $30,000 to buy a cyber cab. I just don't know how those numbers make sense. I think it's a legitimate question to raise. They didn't talk about apps and deployment the way Waymo's doing it.
Sure.
He more talked about the vehicle, had some glitz, like typical unveiling of a vehicle, but didn't get into a lot of detail.
It fell flat. A lot of the financial analysts that I've read, it fell flat.
Well, but I wouldn't underestimate him. I think he's got more data than anybody else. He's not using LiDAR, which is raising other questions too. He's got AI and cameras in the vehicles, but he's not using LiDAR the way.
Explain LiDAR for the crowd.
Well, I mean, LiDAR is an imaging technology which works with the cameras to kind of really map out the road,
and identify what's on the picture.
Correct. Where I think Elon is going, from at least what I believe from his public statements, is he's investing in general in AI and predictive technology. So, what these companies are going to end up doing is making predictions about what's going to happen next on the road as a public safety matter, which really makes it even safer, much more safe than a human driver. Because now we're talking about, not only they've mapped the road, they know what the road looks like, they know what things happen on the road. So it's not just what's happening in real time, but, a school bus crosses this intersection every day at this time.
Every day between 3:01 and 3:10. And do you think most people understand that every Tesla on the road is sending the data back? Does everybody know that?
I mean, I don't know if people are really cued into it. Using lasers and creating 3D models, this technology does all that. It's really sophisticated. I believe it's been developed by certain companies better than others. But one thing I think the movement is playing catch up on is that there's been such a focus on road safety and getting the technology to be safe and deployed to save lives, but not enough focus on the socioeconomic issues and the political issues.
Oh, 100%.
So they're going to be stopped in their tracks if they don't have an accessible vehicle. They're going to be stopped in their tracks in certain cities because the Teamsters is very powerful, and they've already been successful in throwing it out of the trucking industry to some extent. So I think to answer your question, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see more and more of them in more cities and states. More so in the areas that that have less licensing requirements. Every state has a deployment and testing law for the most part. Some are easier to get into than others. Connecticut, DC, Hawaii, Massachusetts, for instance, they restrict AV to testing only, but and there's a couple like Arkansas and Louisiana that it's just for commercial purposes. But for the most part, the law allows testing and deployment if you go through certain hoops. Some states don't even have licensing requirements, like Colorado, Tennessee, and Texas, right? So we're going to see more and more states and cities doing it. You're going to see more and more of these vehicles being normalized. When I went back after our conference this year to the Phoenix area, it's become normalized. And I think
100% normalized.
It's like, I would ask the person, the concierge, what about these Waymo vehicles? They sometimes they come here, they pick up our passengers, and they stop and they get a little confused, but they come in and there's never any issue. It's like normalized. I think that's important, that these vehicles, people see them, they get used to them. It's not a novelty anymore, but is it going to take over the world overnight? No. I think it's going to be just one of many ways to get around. It's going to become a niche industry for many years to come. I mean, will there be a point where everything's driving itself? Probably in the future. But there's a lot of mystery surrounding Elon's business model. I would not underestimate him for 1 second.
No.
He definitely has agendas floating on all over the place.
He never disappoints. Never disappoints.
And there are 3 business models. And this is great news, because when I first started in this movement, there wasn't a business model. I went to a conference in Brussels. The US government appointed me to go to this thing where we're working with the European Union, and people were off their chairs saying, everybody's going to buy 5 driverless cars and we're going to have congestion. Well, that didn't happen. It's basically the Uber model, the shuttle model, and Elon is selling to the masses. So like the Waymos and the Cruises of the world, they bought the vehicles and controlled them themselves.
Yes.
A lot of people at the beginning of the movement just thought that people were going to buy them, which is what Elon's been doing. But I wouldn't count him out yet. I think he's got a lot more surprises that will come. Obviously, there's been investigations and things that have saddled down the company. So
on the accident side?
Well, yes, and also the self-driving mode. There's NHTSA has been investigating. I think people, there's theories that it's political, and there's a lot of politics involved. So I actually think his foray into politics was a brilliant move because he was being, killed by politics anywhere.
Oh, masterful, masterful.
He doubled down. He won the bet. He aligned himself with Trump, and now he's at Mar-a-Lago all day. But
now look. That could have gone another way, Matt. That could have gone another way, and he'd be moving more money offshore.
He's a risky guy. I mean,
he does, yeah.
And he reinvests. It's like a gambler that just doubles down all their winnings. But he's been on top and right a lot of times, so he's very smart. I wouldn't count him out by any
no way.
Constructive criticism. His team needs to engage more with cities. Like you can't really have a new disruptive technology like this and not talk to the government people and have a good PR and government relations strategy. Waymo has successfully done that. And look at them. They launched in San Francisco, LA, Miami.
And they have the data. They have the data. They have the safety data.
An amazing government relations and media team. Elon, the Tesla, everything's been shrouded in secrecy, right?
Like the skunk works back in the day, right? The skunk works of new aeronautic technology. I agree with you. I think that's one of his modes of operation is secrecy.
Well, I agree with you on that. That's his MO. And then strategically things are announced and the stock prices go up. But we all know how that game works, right? But ultimately, I think the technology has proven itself. SpaceX, Tesla, he's ahead of the curve, but I think where he's got the edge and is a threat to a lot of folks in this movement is number one, he's got a tremendous amount of data. Remember, he's had this self-driving mode for years now, and it kept getting more and more sophisticated and more vehicles are out there. And he's got internally such tremendous data that has not been shared. Number two, he is doubling down on AI. AI plays a significant portion of how a robo taxi works. And the fact that he's actually doing, a bus is very interesting, right? But do I think it's going to affect the limousine industry anytime soon? No, because the reality is that, look, I just made arrangements to my daughter's birthday to have her go to Atlantic City. I don't want a driverless bus, I want somebody who's going to be like a chaperone, look out for the girls when you go down there, just turned 21. And we also have the ability to, on the big picture, the customer service side, like even if limos were driverless, people are going to expect someone to take their luggage, to tell them where to go, to talk to.
Meet them in the meet and greet at the airport, handle the logistics concierge aspect. I 100% agree with you.
It's not going to happen anytime soon. And the risks are so great for not having somebody with disabled people and people that are senior citizens getting in the vehicles to go to doctor's appointments. I don't see those two industries being affected. The taxi industry,
yes,
and the Uber industry will be affected to a certain extent over the next 5 years, but it's going to be just one of many ways to get around. And it also, not everyone's going to want to use it. It's going to be more of the forward-thinking younger folks that want to do something cool, or if it ends up being cheaper, the people that can't afford it will take it. I think it remains to be seen. But again, 3 business models: self-ownership, Elon, and people could power to the people.
And put it on a platform if you want to put it on a platform, is what you're saying.
I still think that's in play. He didn't mention it at his last announcement, but it was their idea, and I think that's the direction that they're going to go.
That's in a couple of analysts. That's in a couple. Yep. That's in a couple of analyst reports that I read. Let me just not identify them, but the rumor that I'm hearing is the Uber is going to be, in the beginning, they're going to really try to put everybody in the platform, including Waymo. Why wouldn't they, right? But at the end of the day, I think that this whole this ownership of a self-driving vehicle and the ability to, if you want to, deploy it while instead of it sitting in the parking lot, I think that's the play between Tesla and Uber. The other piece of Musk is the ability to literally, almost at some point autonomize some of the older Teslas in some sort of a retrofit model. But I think that business model of I own it, but I'm going to put it on the Uber platform during the day, right, to mitigate my cost. I agree with you. I think that's where he's heading. So,
And there's no secret. Like if he says it's going to be $30,000, I don't believe that he could be profitable at $30,000. But let's not forget, Uber, when they started, they subsidized driver pay and passenger fares for years.
yep.
I can see a world where Elon wants to get a massive scale of these vehicles out there for people to use them as if they're their own fleet owners, and he will possibly subsidize it to make it affordable for a period of time so that he can scale quickly by offering the Robo Taxis, the cyber cabs for $30,000, even though like the actual cost may be $70,000 or $100,000, whatever it ends up being. Get them out there, and then people will start becoming their own entrepreneurs. If that can be done from a regulatory standpoint, you're giving power to the people, number one. Number two, look at Turo for an example. Turo started out as something where it's like sharing economy, like Airbnb. I just want to let my vehicle go out there. People in Florida and in Arizona, all sorts of
they fleece them.
It is now a business model. So I could see like somebody saying, I'm going to buy 10 Teslas.
Yes, and I'll put them on the Uber platform.
And it can be done just like they're doing with Turo. Like if I want to rent like a luxury vehicle in Miami, I realized that when I had a problem with one of the people I rented from, that person owned like half of the fleet in Miami. So I realized that this has become almost like a de facto franchise.
Yes, and for those that don't know, Turo is an independent rental platform that Turo puts you on their platform, and you as an individual can supply 5 vehicles. I mean, we've done some financial analysis for these Turo guys when they've said, hey, what do you think about putting a Rolls Royce in my fleet? I'm like, you're out of your mind. But I mean, we prove it with math. Elon can do the same thing. If this vehicle cost him $45,000, to make, at some point he goes to Uber and says, I want a revenue share on this, right? And it's a mathematical equation of how many trips it takes to reach that. But you, to your point, he can afford to subsidize these autonomous taxis for a period of time just to test the waters.
And going back to the first question you raised about insurance, though, when we talk about the Turo model, that's a perfect example of how the limo industry could come up with, first of all, you could probably use Turo to start, renting vehicles and driving people around. But wouldn't it be great if like the NLA, or the Florida Limousine Association had an app, where people can list all their limos and other competitors could use the vehicles when they needed? I mean, that's a great solution, because you can get fleet insurance as a rental entity and use it as an app, just like Turo did, where if you're strapped and all of your connections in your neighborhood, the 5 vehicle companies that you work with, the 5 limo competitors, sometimes you need a vehicle. And you can't get there needs to be a platform where the limo industry can go to get these vehicles without, because sometimes, especially when there's peak supply and demand times, like prom season, or there's, an
event. Yeah.
An event. There needs to be another way to tap into vehicles that are insured and ready to go, that drivers can just get behind the wheel. And that is something that we should seriously be looking at in terms of a solution to the insurance crisis. Because remember, Uber and Lyft did this already, and it's been successful.
Yep.
Okay, drivers don't even buy or insure vehicles anymore in a large number of states. They just go and they
pick it up.
Vehicle,
That's it.
It has to be a niche thing, because obviously you're not going to have like these luxury limo operators renting like a Prius necessarily, or going, to get one of these rental vehicles that you would get at Hertz.
But to your point, I mean, connected capacity is the first thing that if I was an operator on the large operators, connected capacity to me is the first order, meaning the first step is, and the technology in our industry, I'm just going to say it flat out, it sucks. Even the best software out there, I'm not naming name, it sucks because connected.
We've been through that, Ken, with the integration and getting the different companies to integrate. But remember, the greatest example of a sharing economy is the limo industry. The industry is built upon sharing clients, sharing, making it an ecosystem.
Right.
So why can't we just translate that to the vehicle side, like grid technologies? And
we should.
Right? But why do you do that with the vehicles? It's a great.
It's the vehicle and the driver. The connected capacity is knowing right now that who's dropping off at JFK, right? Whether it's Empire, Boston Coach, any of the bigs dropping off, and knowing that that guy has 2 or 3 hours before his next scheduled trip. Connected capacity is the first step. And we have to get that so that an operator in LA knows what's on the road today in New York and has an idea. And it falls back to labor. If we have to pay this person an 8-hour minimum, or we have to pay them for being, it's tough to put them down and they've got a 2-hour gap. How do you maximize the use of that piece of equipment and that driver? And to your point, why don't the big companies get together and say, you know what, let's create a contract with a leasing company, a common leasing company that owns the vehicles, trains the drivers, to your point, and deploys that connected capacity. So I think at the end of the day, that's where our hamstring has been from a tech perspective. And there needs to be, again, more cooperation and a collegiate mentality, both on the insurance side and the capacity side.
So, and I may be using stuff on the insurance side. I think it'd be good to really get like a podcast going, maybe like Tim and
100%.
Steve and Andrew from research and Tom, get them up here and talk about, like how this could work, because, there's always a concern about, underwriting and how it works. It's a mystery. Named drivers versus corporate policies, loss runs. Like, how do you insure something like this and also adhere to existing regulations that at the insurance side?
Right. So, but to your point, the model is there. The model is there. And it's worked for Uber. So why not look into it? I think it's a better endeavor than Rick is still looking into captives, and it could still happen, but it's very hard to ask an industry like the limo industry to pony up hundreds of thousands of dollars to capitalize a captive. Trust me, I see their balance sheets. They don't have it.
But it's also hard to get them together, I think, and try to do something like this too. I almost feel like it cries out for a dealership or a separate entity that does rental to expand. Like
absolutely.
5 or 6 companies that are doing it in New York, in my opinion, especially Voyager, which was known as Buggy. They should expand around the country. They're already in Mexico City, but they should expand around the country in the limo industry. There are other companies thinking about this, but there would need to be probably somebody that comes in and does it, because I think it's going to be very difficult for like the limo industry to get organized to do this. But once it gets going and there's a platform, list of vehicles, there will be an app and there'd be companies that do all this stuff. But then they could offer, like you said, ancillary things like training and things that independent contractor operators would be concerned about doing. But again, bring it back to the Rick Versace model. I take his vehicles like every other week. His drivers are independent contractors. You would never notice the difference.
Right.
In other recent states, I noticed the difference right away.
Absolutely.
And, my vendors who know me very well know that I always insist on a house car. Because I want the trained employed chauffeur from that company. And I got to tell you, there's a way to do it and manage the risk. So you basically have to manage, do I want to take the risk of a crash that's going to put me out of business, or a customer is going to be so pissed that they fire me and I lose my biggest account, versus the risk of having a labor lawsuit against you? You have to balance those risks. David Eckstein from Valera Global years ago balanced those risks, and he ended up on top and saved this company. And he could come on here and tell you all about that experience. You're not going to get him on here.
And the transition to the franchise model. Yep.
at the end of the day, I always tell our clients, you need a good human resources and driver management person, because 9 out of 10 times, I've seen companies and clients of mine go under from these worker classifications. It's 9 out of 10 times it's because the drivers are being treated like crap by the people that run the business.
Especially
And
the
if
dispatch team.
every once in a while, you're going to get a crazy driver. You can't control them. Nothing works. But 9 out of 10 times, if you treat them with respect and dignity, they don't get pissed, because it's usually that driver that feels that they got wrong. They got shortchanged on something, miscommunication. They get their friends riled up and they bring these labor lawsuits against you. And half of them are BS sometimes, right?
Yep.
But they'll give you a hard time. And these plaintiffs' lawyers come in, just like personal injury plaintiff lawyers. They get a contingency fee. So they're not going to leave until they, like a sexual harassment case, they're not going to leave until they get a certain amount of money. So this is part of the problem, is the contingency fees. Tort reform extends into the labor field. But like, if you're doing that balancing act, you pick someone who's really good with people to manage these drivers and keep them happy. You know, I refer to that. I don't know if you remember the Cheers episode, you know, when Norm was involved in firing people in the back of the bar, and the guy who was doing the firing, Norm from Cheers, would come out crying, and the employee that was being fired is patting him on the back saying, it's going to be okay. You need somebody like that who's going to be able to be compassionate and connect with the drivers. And that's 90% of solving your problem with morale and the independent contractor issue. If drivers feel disrespected and they feel like they're being taken advantage of, and there's poor communication, that's what leads to the labor lawsuits. And it's a fact.
And think about it. If you treat them like chattel, how do you think they're going to treat the customer? Look, we could have, that's another episode that we're going to have. And I think you're right. You bring in an esteemed for that. And then on the insurance side, Steve Freeberg, I'm a big fan of research. Okay. I'm a big fan of Lancer, because Tim reached out to me and I'm like, this guy is an advocate for our industry, but we also have to advocate for ourselves. Matt, this episode to me has crystallized why you're not just a transportation attorney. You are the transportation attorney for the industry, because of the vast knowledge that you have. And we both live it 50, 60 hours a week. You live it across the world. The regulatory side, there's nobody, you are the unicorn as far as transportation lawyers. We need to definitely do this more often. And we also need to collaborate more. I mean, look, I view this as my second act in the industry as far as the M&A side. We try our hardest to get people's babies looking beautiful before we sell them. Sometimes it's difficult because they're pretty ugly going in. And we try to get people more profitable so that they can afford to absorb any cost driver that goes up. And insurance is the big one. I am so glad to have you on, because I've been worried about this autonomous thing. I have my own suppositions on it. I agree with you that the limousine industry, the chauffeur industry, the luxury side of the industry is going to be affected last. I think we're probably right before NEMT. I do think the taxi industry is going to be further disrupted by these things quicker than we're going to know. So thank you for coming on our little podcast again. Matt, tell everybody how to reach you by email, so that if they have any questions or have any legal needs, how do we reach you?
Well, yeah, you can get me at mdaus@windells.com. You can always call me on my cell, 646-261-1590. My team and I are ready and available to help you at any time. And, anyone who references Ken's podcast, we'll give them a discount. So thanks for all your kind words.
Look, you are officially going to be our first frequent guest, because I love interacting with you. I think that when you and I get on stage, we get rave reviews together. Sometimes it's a drier topic, but frankly, it's a financial necessity and a business survival. All of our subjects are of that ilk. I appreciate you coming on more than I can say. This was a coup for our audience, and it's a highlight of my week. And I know I'll see you soon.
Same here. Happy holidays to you, your listeners, and Let's get excited about 2025. I think we're going to have a
Sounds
great year, and let's get this industry rocking and rolling.
Thank you for listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about PAX training and to contact James, go to paxtraining.com. And for more information about driving transactions and to contact Ken, go to drivingtransactions.com. We'll see you next time on the Ground Transportation Podcast.